I'm not comfortable with you filming me. I'm happy
Well,
for
you
you to
talk
film.
over it.
I'm happy for you to film me.
Here, well, this is the guy who's the general manager.
I'm not the general manager.
Well, he got a badge which says general manager.
It doesn't.
That's what it says. Oh, development manager, he says.
So,
Are you brought in especially for this development, or are you a resident?
no, I'm a resident.
You're a resident. Now, he's brought me to have a look at this model, which, as always, models are very seductive. Of course, you've got to get down to see it where human... This is the seagull's eye view. Well, I'm not a seagull, and we've got to look at it down here.
So what we're doing, we're responding back to the planning committee's comments and original decision that the building's too high and too big.
Right.
So we've taken 2 stories off the back rear terrace, 1 story off the north pavilion here, to make it more acceptable in planning terms, heritage impact terms, and aesthetics as well, probably. So this is going to be resubmitted to the planning committee in November. We're hopeful that it's going to be acceptable to them, and they're going to...
I thought they'd gone off models at the planning office. I thought they had a room full of models and they didn't want any more. I thought they were doing it all by photographic enhancements, you know.
Well, no, we've presented this to the planning committee at the first meeting, which they used, and so we'll be resubmitting this as part of the submission.
I see on the written material it's underground car parking.
That's correct.
Access from
South Hill.
South Hill, right.
There's a basement for 70 car parking spaces.
Because there's a very nasty junction at South Hill, which goes about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ways, I think, doesn't it? Where cars come up.
Down here is the junction that you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. Is that...
I think as part of the highway works, we're going to be putting in a couple of pedestrian crossings to improve pedestrian accessibility. There'll be one at the bottom and one at the top here.
Right.
And there'll also be a footpath, because these buildings are set back from the road.
Right.
So
I mean, obviously, people who are living in the flats want private space of their own. Obviously, there's public space up there. What will the people have in the way of private space?
Each property will have their own either terrace or balcony, private space associated with the development. There'll be a range of apartment sizes, 1 to 3 bedrooms.
Right.
There'll be
what would you anticipate the number of children that will finish up on the site? I mean, guessing on the number of the family accommodation that's available.
I couldn't say. Don't know. I mean, there are 2-bedroom, 63 2-bedroom units. 6 3-bedroom units, so it's possible there will be children on the site, and obviously we've got the park, a synergy with the park next door. So
because public housing, for some reason, seems to have gone off. Anything above 2 beds, 3 beds and 4 beds don't seem to be very popular for some reason.
Well, they're expensive. They're expensive to build, aren't they? But we'll provide, I think, 6 3-bedroom units here.
Right,
yeah.
And what percentage of those will be sold?
They'll all be sold, although there'll be an element of affordable housing here.
An element.
15%.
Why have you elected to do them to sell off? Obviously, I remember Mr. Cohen, he made the faux pas one day of saying that they could cash in and make them some very luxury, expensive development. And then one day he went into a supermarket and the cashier said, "What are you talking about? Why don't you make it rentable, affordable? People who haven't got any money deserve a decent view and aspect just the same." And after that he said, "Well, I've changed my policy now. I agree, it should be affordable at least. But all this won't be affordable, whatever that means. This won't all be affordable."
Well, we're building them to make them as affordable as possible.
Right.
They'll be efficiently built and they'll be efficient to run when they're built.
So thanks Neil.
There's a voice,
hello.
God speaking to us.
How are you?
Okay.
So the focus on this site is for owner-occupiers. So that's the brief that's been set by government. So that's going to be a combination of first-time buyers and right sizers, whether it be people looking to downsize or indeed upsize.
Do you know how many owner-occupiers there are in Jersey who live in their own house?
Off the top of my head, no. There's probably about 25, 30,000.
24,000. You're pretty good. 24,000 owner-occupied dwellings, and there are about 48,000
households.
Exactly. Now, obviously, It's a half. In other words, half the population, half of that group of people own. Will they ever? I mean, on this scheme, you're going to add a few to owner-occupiers. Presumably people who aren't, or they are, or they're going to move from somewhere else. You don't know that, do you? People who buy these dwellings.
No, so I mean, all that we can base it on is our developments that we've completed to date, both at College Gardens and at Horizon. 35% of those units have been bought by first-time buyers.
Right.
The government is now focusing, as I say, solely on owner-occupiers for this development. So if we apply that 35% to this scheme, then there will be a further proportion that will be obviously either existing owner-occupiers who will be either upsizing or downsizing.
Right.
As my colleague referenced there, 15% of these units will also be shared equity affordable units. So we're again trying to. There will be a further 15% potentially first-time buyers. So there could be 50% of these units.
Now, Jersey Development, you arrange your own selling, do you? The marketing you obviously put to an agent or agents?
No, we have our own sales team for these units. But the eligibility criteria for those shared equity units will be set by the Housing Minister.
Housing Minister. And long term, who guarantees, in Jersey Development, if it goes bust, presumably the government will pick up the tab if you overdo it on something. Who guarantees the security if there's shared equity? Who guarantees that?
So those shared equity, the retained element of those shared equity units will be passed on by us to government. So government will hold that retained equity, as it does already with our college. We had 40 shared equity units at College Gardens, and government holds the retained equity in those units, and it will be the same arrangement here at South Hill.
Right. Well, it's curious about this. I live in a tower block, and I was delighted. I used to live rather like this. The tower block was there, and there was another block there, and the sea view was there. But I notice on here, you've got your building blocks there. Are those people not going to have the same sea view? They're going to have to look round the corner? Are they going to complain, oh, we haven't got the nice view?
Well, I think you'll be able to get the views from either side there.
Right. And why have you tucked it in so close to the cliff face and not bring it forward to the front of the site? So, because I know from living in various places, they can get very cold and damp if you dig them too close to the rock face.
So this is a significant distance from the rock face.
Right.
But again, the architectural approach here was to incorporate this into the natural escarpment.
Right.
By bringing forward that bulk and mass onto the front elevation would be very overbearing on the road and on the harbourscape itself.
Right. The concept that you've come up with, this one, how many schemes were there that you did before you arrived at this one? Many?
So actually for this particular site, we went out to and had a design competition. So I think we ended up with 10 entries on that competition, with this being the winning submission.
Right.
Obviously, at that point in the competition stage, it's just a concept, but it was the concept of the very organic and natural approach to the architecture that we felt really sat well within this highly visible and sensitive site.
What's going to be public amenity? This is a part of public park.
So all of the public park here will be re-landscaped and retained as public amenity space. This area here will be private terrace areas for the residents.
Right. And at the back, where they do the driving tests and all that?
So all of this area, yes, all of this around here where the driving bays are, the reversing bays, that's all retained. That is not part of the scheme.
I mean, this intermixing of people, how much sort of money are they going to be paying for their flats? What's the range?
At this stage, we can't say what the prices will be. You know, we're at least a year away from commencing the marketing of these.
You know what money you've got to get back to make it viable.
We know as of today. Who knows where we'll be in a year's time with the with the market, etc. So that will be reassessed before we go out to appoint a contractor.
Are you getting any thoughts at the moment from people who finance property? Are they expressing long-term views of what will happen in 12 months' time for people who want to buy them?
I think the expectation is that the period of low interest rates has now passed, and where the bank base rate will be in 12 months' time isn't likely to be lower than it is today, and so that's a factor that will be needing to be taken into account by both by the purchasers and by developers in their funding.
Obviously, if somebody's laying out a lot of money to build it, they must have some knowledge about the scale, the size of the first-time buyer market. Have you got any idea what the potential for first-time buyers is? How many people it could be?
So we have at the moment over 800 purchasers expressing an interest in buying a residential property, and that's reduced from about 1,800 when we were also selling to investors. So we've got 800.
Are they realistic buyers, do you think, from what you know about them, they can afford to buy?
Yes, and we've had a number of people, members of the public, coming through the doors today that are here as interested buyers. Right.
Obviously, not obviously, but my main interest is with the non-quals sector. Now, obviously, non-quals people will only get to live in these flats at the moment if they're lodging with somebody who's bought one. Is that correct? In other words, they can't buy one, can they, or rent one?
These are for either entitled or licensed purchasers only. This will be via a flying freehold structure, so there won't be a share transfer purchase.
So there will be, it's a flying freehold, and presumably there will be some shared costs for
there'll be
cleaning
a service charge. Yes, there'll be a service charge. Yes,
on top of their mortgage.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Yeah.
Are there many people coming along and saying, "Look, we don't want a mortgage. We got cash"? Is that a sector you ever meet?
There may well be in due course. I think if they're an owner-occupier, then that's providing that's gone all through the due diligence, then there are fortunate individuals within that position.
You don't offer a scheme where we say, well, we'll buy your house and then that will go towards you. You don't offer the full round scheme.
Interestingly, that you should ask that, because one of our focuses is around the under-occupation of family units. And my ears pricked up earlier when you were asking about the housing mix here in terms of unit type. I can't recall the exact stats from the latest census, but the previous census, 44% of owner-occupied properties were under-occupied by 2 or more bedrooms. And there will be a number of those owners that want to remain within that family home, but there may be some that wish to downsize but haven't quite found the right alternative. And equally, there will be some that may be put off from downsizing because of the fees associated with downsizing. So one of the things that we're looking at and devising effectively an incentive package is that we would look to cover the stamp duty and moving costs for somebody exiting from a family unit, providing that family unit is within a certain price bracket, and that family unit is sold on to a local family. And with those provisions in place, we would cover their stamp duty and move costs up to a certain value on this scheme.
Do you not find that there, my estimation, is between 12 and 15,000 working adults who don't have housing quals? Now, in any normal community, that would be like a fifth of the working population. Wouldn't that be an extraordinary thing to remove from buying houses? Do you not find that demand, you'd like to satisfy that demand?
I think all of that would need to be very carefully taken into account, and the unintended consequences of that fully assessed. There's always been, and I recall, as you will, when it used to be a 20-year qualification
I remember
period.
when it was never.
And so that's come down to 10 years. Whether it goes down further, I think is to be calculated and reviewed. But I haven't an opinion.
At the moment, all the other schemes you've got ongoing, you've got the one on the waterfront, which is called
Horizon.
Is that all sold, or are there still units?
There are 4 units left available.
Is that all? 4
Yes.
units? Right. And what sort of price range are they?
So those are some of the penthouse units that we have available now.
And what price were the general ones? The general, because you've got about 7 floors, haven't you?
Yes, so for the blocks are, I think, 9, 8 and 7 stories. So those units, we started the pre-sales on those way back in November 2017. So the market's obviously moved a
I'm just
significant way
trying to work
since
out,
then.
so these will be at least the prices of that development, at least?
This,
Yes.
these will be higher than
Higher,
Horizon
right,
because
okay.
of the Horizon prices are 5 years out of date.
Right. So people who bought them 5 years ago, you would say have got a good deal?
They're in for a very good paper profit at the moment. Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
I think the other element of this scheme is around the environmental credentials of the build. So we're building this to the principles of Passive House.
Right.
So we're looking at a fabric-first approach to insulation and to air tightness, so that we're trying to minimise the energy in use on this completed development. So that's a feature that we're then looking to deploy on our future residential projects.
What design, I've got a few more thoughts that occurred to me. Disability design. Now, how do you approach that? Do you make all buildings to some degree, all flats to some degree, wheelchair accessible or adapted in readiness, or do you leave that to the tenant to sort out?
No. So, I mean, all the Jersey bylaws require all bathrooms, for example, to be wheelchair accessible.
They do.
And doorways, etc.
Right.
Are, I believe, of a suitable size for wheelchairs.
Right.
In terms of the very kind of detailed design requirements, would need to involve the.
Do you employ a designer specifically to look at things like light switches and all the rest of it that goes with disability design? It's not just those obvious things. Do you employ an auditor to look at your designs?
We don't. No, that's I believe covered as part of the building bylaws now in terms of the heights of door handles and light switches and etc.
Okay, because obviously people think, oh, we're going to make this flat wheelchair friendly or whatever, but they forget that if you live in a flat and you're not disabled, you might have disabled visitors. So it's not just the unit itself to be for the tenant or the occupier.
Indeed.
It's other people, it's everybody, isn't it?
Yes, that's quite right.
Okay, and things like battery charging for wheelchairs or whatever, are you installing provision for that?
So within the basement there are electric vehicle charging points, etc. I must confess I'm not sure how the if it's a mobility scooter, for example, I would that could be located in the basement, and there will be charging points.
There are security issues if you leave your wheelchair, which can be quite expensive. And the other thing,
the entire basement will be secure. So, and there will be storage areas for bicycles and other.
Have you considered the possible dangers of electric charging on site? Because some of these things, true or false, I don't know, but some of these things have a habit of exploding. Electric bicycles. Mostly if people play around with them, they put a different battery on to the one that should be on it. But they take those into their flat, for example, and then it bursts into flame. Presumably all these flats will have sprinkler systems.
Yes. Yeah.
And are you relying on that and smoke exhaust? Is that the sort of system you're relying on?
Yeah.
Right. it's not an aspect as such that wheelchairs or bicycles and scooters, because even mobile phones, you remember, they wouldn't let people on aeroplanes with a certain brand of mobile phone for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's that for everything you've got to consider, but these things do have to be considered, don't they?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Have you, what happens with the building of this complexity, because it is quite complicated, does the fire service get called in at an early age to ticket them, or is there certificating?
No, there's so in terms of the design
Right.
and part of the consultation on the design, the emergency services would have been involved as a statutory consultee on the design. There's a fire access here for a fire engine to come through into the site.
Can they get round to the back of the building as well?
They won't get to the back. They will be then. It's to the front, and then they access through into the risers in the building. So all of that has been provided.
Okay, I'll stop now. Function dictates form. That's the key word. I don't suppose it's your key word. I suspect your key word has got to do with balancing the books rather more than function. I'd view that as part of the function.
Yeah, indeed. Viability. It has to stack up. Otherwise, it won't get built.
Have you bought the land, or do you get it gifted by the states?
We will be acquiring the land. We will be buying the land.
Father Christmas will give it to you, will he?
No, we will be paying for the site.
Right, okay. How do they work that out? I mean, I could go on, there's questions. How do they work that out? Suppose you don't build all the flats. Do you still have to pay the same price for the land, regardless?
Yes, I mean, the land value will be based on the planning approved scheme.
Okay.
So it will be within our, we will be then building out per that planning approved scheme.
Okay, that's enough. Stop. Thank you much.